France is set to choose its next leader on Sunday. President Emmanuel Macron is facing off against right-wing challenger Marine Le Pen. Many in the U.S. are watching this race closely. Macron has been a key player in talks about how to respond to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Le Pen has openly criticized both the EU and NATO and has said Moscow is an ally of France, although she has declared solidarity with Ukraine more recently. Joining us now is Barry Pavel. He is the Senior Vice President and Director of the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. The center works to develop national security strategies for government entities and businesses. Barry, welcome. So tell us, U.S. officials are anxiously awaiting the outcome of Sunday's election. Let's just start off by explaining for our viewers why this French election is being watched so closely by the United States and other governments.
Well, thank you. Yes, I mean, it's being watched very closely, and it appears to be a close election as well. And the reason it's being watched so closely is there's a lot at stake in terms of U.S. foreign policy. President Biden has defined the current moment as a struggle between democracies and autocracies, dictatorships, Putin, Xi Jinping's China, et cetera. And so the U.S. and its democratic allies in Europe and Asia are kind of in a contest against China and Russia. And if Macron doesn't win, he's been a very close ally of the United States. It's a real setback in one of the world's leading democratic countries. And the reason is that his opponent is considered not really democratic. And she also is not an internationalist. She does not like, international groupings as much, such as NATO, the EU. And as was said, she is close to Putin and close to Russia. So all of this effort would really be, at minimum weakened or slowed. And France's role would really change, and they've been a really close ally. So it would be quite different.
So, Barry, as you say, the polls seem to still favor Macron, but it is a much tighter election than the last time Macron and Le Pen faced off. If Le Pen were successful and victorious, how would that impact France's relationship with the EU and with NATO?
So this might sound familiar to Americans. She's hostile to these large international groupings. She's hostile to the European Union. She would try to reduce France's the influence of the EU in France and likely elsewhere. France with Germany leads the European Union. So her election, as someone who is not in favor of the union, certainly would not, be favorable for it. She's also a pretty serious critic of Germany, and the France-Germany relationship is the real engine of the European Union. Now, regarding NATO, the military alliance that the United States is in, certainly if she were elected, France's role would also be different going forward. It's a little like how President Trump kind of distanced the United States from NATO, but a little different because she is very close to Putin. She is not an advocate for NATO. She kind of wants to position France in between the U.S. and Russia, which is really not where France has been for a long time. So This would be very different.
That would be a tremendous difference for the entire EU and for NATO. Barry, time for one more question. It was interesting to see how voters in France are responding to Macron and tying him to the economic hardships that are very similar to what we're facing here in the United States, inflation, et cetera, and how that has eroded his public support. Recent polls still give him the edge, as I've said, but some analysts are saying that liberal voters in particular may stay home or even cast a protest vote for Le Pen over Macron, who is a centrist. He's not even on the left. He's a centrist. Important for our viewers to know that. Can you explain why these voters would show support for a candidate like Le Pen over Macron and how she has been able to sort of take part of that extreme left part of the ideological spectrum and really try and siphon off some of those voters in France?
Sure. I think there's sort of three issues. First, who's ever the president, owns the economy, whether it's good or bad. When it's good, it's a pretty nice lift for their electoral prospects. when it's bad, it's really tough. And the same is in the United States, and the same is in France. So that's kind of number one. I think number two, there's kind of a likability issue that doesn't really favor President Macron. He's sometimes seen as distant, as isolated, an intellectual, an elite. He can come across as a little bit insensitive to everyday problems. And then the third issue, I think, is the economy and spending power, with inflation rising fast, enormous government debt in France because of their COVID response, helping businesses, helping people, et cetera. And so Le Pen is seen as fighting for those people, as fighting for those left behind, those who are hurting economically, but also there's an identity and a culture issue too. So she's a fierce nationalist. She's fiercely anti-immigrant. The last thing I'd say is, I'm not sure we should believe polls again. And so
of course,
they were wrong in recent elections. So I worry about what the polls are saying and whether that will be reflected in reality.
The only poll I've heard before that really matters is that final vote count. All right, Barry Pavel, thank you.
Thank you.